FoxHound, Chapter 1. The otherworldly hiss broke mostly from his napping, sending the daggers of ice up and down his spine. As the hounds began to bark, the old man knew he was going to need a scattergun. If the graying man hadn't enough warning, the sprite that shot in through the window gave him a certainty that he could not deny. He slipped shells out of his breast pocket as he neared the door, mostly found his heavy iron waiting, propped beside the door. Yanking it up by the sling, his ears were struck with another of those sinister calls as the hounds let out another volley of shouts and curses. Flinging open the door, Mosley pulled up the gun, only taking the slightest survey of what was before him, then firing. All Mosley cared was that he didn't hit one of his dogs or anyone who may be passing on those seldom traveled roads deep in the gardens. Intense, almost electric lime light burst from the muzzle, sending a cluster of jagged metal at the beast. Normally Mosley would wait before firing another round at any target. No reason to waste those precious shells. But this wasn't the average prey. He pumped and fired 3 more shots before taking one of the spares and pumping it into the open action. The gun smoke cleared. The world around Mosley's old lot fell silent, and what little peace of mind the man had returned to him. Clumps of bright orange fur lay scattered all across the front lawn, as though he had randomly planted bunches of marigolds everywhere. The fence, with its string of bottles holding lesser sprites, was askew, looking as though someone had run a full team of horses through part of it. Mosley's garden was half dug up, something he wished he could blame on the hares or hounds. And then his eyes fixed on the 2 great dogs, still at the end of their chains, growling at such a constant and steady level, Mosley could barely tell they made noise at all. He stuck 2 cracked old fingers in his mouth and let out a whistle that caused both hounds to snap out of their current moods. The chains fell slack, and the younger of the 2, still barely more than a pup, began an anxious whine. Mosley's older one didn't give in to such immature acts. Ames was too much of a veteran for that. Taking his gun in one hand, Mosley made his way over to the dog house, keeping cautious eyes on the road. He didn't think the hag's little Kit would make a second stop at his place tonight, but he'd been wrong before. Mosley stepped past Ames, giving him a pat on his muzzle, and moved to rein in the less than calm purse. With one well-timed grab, he snatched the jade-colored chain of the mutt and brought its big brown eyes down to his level. He knew the dogs were just that, dogs, only different from any other hound because of their size. Still, Mosley would talk to them like any enchanted creature. They wouldn't respond, couldn't, and probably would not understand, but Mosley was just that way with his animals. Gesturing down the path, Mosley began, "Purse! The damn fox is long gone. If you'd wanted to tackle that runt down, then you shoulda when it done come into our yard." He gave the pup a wallop on the muzzle, sending the gray-coated hound running for its shelter. Then Mosley fixed on Ames. "And what's your excuse? You're supposed to be showing that one how to guard this place. You're the captain, and the captain has to get his paws dirty, too. Don't just leave it up to the little one to catch that skulking rat. Next time, you bring me that thing's tail. Show Purse how it's done." Twilight was fading fast into the deep dark of night in the woods. A silence permeated the air, making everything uncomfortable. Mosley got back to the porch, watching as Ames casually wandered around to his shared shelter. The old man wanted to curse himself for falling asleep, but maybe more so for scolding the hounds like he did. Looking down to his hands, Mosley saw the answer for why he would act the way he always did. Life had been hard. It was easy now, but life was always easier if you had all the hard out of the way. Then he fixed on the gun and wondered if there wasn't another way around this whole mess. Gripping the well-worn piece of metal tight, Mosley agreed with himself on that thought. If the varmint didn't come back in the night, he would go down to the old woman's hut and try to talk some sense into her. He had lived down the lane from old Miss Winifred half his life now. They weren't the kind of neighbors to have one another over for a cup of tea or coffee like folks from some nice picture book. Mosley hadn't minded the old woman, despite every last rumor claiming that she was a witch come in from the southern seas. That kind of talk only went so far with Mosley. He didn't buy it or bother with it. He would often enough help the pumpkin-faced old woman out by plowing her walkway in the winters, taking the scythe to the grass in the summers, and keeping the animals out of her yard and garden. Mosley could only expect that she would be amenable to his request if only he asked. That reminded the old man just how little he liked dealing with other folk. It wasn't so much that he didn't like others, but it seemed no matter what, any conversation he tried to make turned sour quicker than a jug of milk in the summer sun. He could only hope Winifred would be a little more reasonable than any number of folks back in town. For the sake of his hounds and livestock, Mosley had only hope to give for them.